The Viking Age spanned just under 300 years, from 900 to 1066 CE, and in less than 3 centuries, the Vikings etched their legacy into history. Sadly, most information about them has been restricted to their exploits, leaving their rich history, culture, and traditions in the background. By piecing together the available evidence, we have painted a fascinating picture of this seemingly forgotten part of the age that would leave you amazed and perhaps even shocked about their way of life. But hey, remember the Vikings originated in modern-day Scandinavia, the region covering Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Also, Viking was really an occupation, and in actuality, they were Norsemen. Being a Norseman was not just one single ethnicity, but consisted of small groups with diverse ancestries. Each group was ruled by a chieftain who often competed with other chieftains for more power. The most ruthless chieftains eventually rose to the top, conquering their rivals and becoming kings of vast territories. Clearly, the Norsemen understood the need for order in their society, contrary to their exploits in Europe that depicted them as warrior savages. At the top of the Norse society, there were the kings, called the Jarls, kind of like Viking nobility. Below them were the Carls, consisting of farmers, builders, and other handymen. Then at the very bottom were the Thralls, the unfortunate souls stuck in the slave class. While Thralls and Carls likely didn't have the same level of leisure for grooming, archaeological evidence shows upper classes like Jarls took pride in their appearance. Not only were they well groomed, they often braided their hair and adorned themselves with intricate jewelry, including necklaces, arm rings, and wristbands. Their clothing also went beyond simple furs. Men wore tunics, kind of like long shirts, that were fitted at the chest and flowed loosely at the bottom. Trousers provided extra warmth underneath. Women donned elegant long dresses, sometimes with an additional overdress for a touch of flair. Both genders secured their outfits with leather belts and added brooches or pins for a finishing touch. As for footwear, it was mostly down to practicality over pizzazz. They wore simple leather booties with soft soles and laces to enclose them around their legs. Sometimes they also used strips of wool to wrap around their lower legs for added warmth during cold weather. Enough about that. Let's move on to something you most likely are curious about. Food. What did the Norsemen eat? You see, the Norsemen had a hearty appetite for meat. From the highest court to the humblest commoner, they all readily indulged in it. Their favorite choice was pigs. They were easy to raise, grew quickly, and a single large hog could sustain a family for days. Goats were another common source of sustenance, and for a time, they too were a dietary staple. But the Norse diet wasn't all about meat. They also relished vegetables and fruits available in their era. Another interesting fact about the Norsemen was that they were surprisingly progressive in some areas for their time. For example, women enjoyed greater freedoms compared to many other cultures. They could inherit property, choose their living arrangements if unmarried, represent themselves legally, and run their own businesses. Women were also pivotal in raising children and managing households, but interestingly, both men and women shared the responsibility of meal preparation. But what did these intriguing people do when they weren't off raiding and plundering? The average Viking was a farmer, tending to crops and livestock. Others were blacksmiths, armorers, weavers, carpenters, jewelers, and more. Despite this diversity of occupations, their essence as explorers and warriors was paramount, driven by a profound belief that they were following in the footsteps of their gods. This spirit propelled the Norsemen to launch daring exploits across Europe, reaching lands they had never seen before. In AD 793, an attack on the Lindisfarne Monastery off the coast of Northumberland in northeastern England would mark the beginning of the Viking Age. You can learn more about this in our other video. More attacks soon followed over the years in the form of hit-and-run raids against coastal targets in Ireland, Scotland, England, and even France. You might also be wondering how the Norsemen were able to sail through treacherous waters to reach these new lands. The answer lies in their extraordinary boat-building skills. They invented the keel and added central spines to the underside of their boats, which made their vessels remarkably stable and seaworthy. Beyond their seafaring abilities, the Norsemen were fearsome in battle. War was seen as an honorable path to glory, and being strong and resilient was practically bred into them. Back then, only 80% of Viking children made it past the age of 5. If a kid was sick or seemed weak, they might be left behind or drowned in the ocean. Interestingly, the average Viking soldier packed a punch with a spear and shield, like a walking wall of defense. They also carried a trusty seax, a multi-purpose knife that doubled as a utility tool and a sidearm. Bows weren't just for hunting. Norsemen brought them on land and sea battles too, but what truly set them apart was their love for axes and knives. These weren't fancy swords, mind you, but simple, brutal tools that got the job done. Wealthy Norsemen even rocked massive two-handed axes, basically the Viking equivalent of a giant battle pickaxe. Given their adventurous lifestyle, you might assume that Norsemen spent all their time in the open. If you thought so, you were definitely wrong. Norse families cherished their time indoors as much as they loved the open. They made for themselves longhouses. These structures were divided into sections, a fire at the center, benches surrounding the fire serving as seating by day and beds by night. In most of these houses, you would also find a variety of pets, including cats, dogs, falcons, peacocks, and even bears. Yes, bear cubs were captured and raised by average families, though polar bears were reserved for noblemen. When it came to leisure time, Norsemen were just like us. They loved games, board games like dice and strategy games, even chess. They had sports too, from wrestling and mock battles to swimming and mountain climbing. Javelin throwing, hunting, and a mysterious horse fighting competition were also popular. And for those who liked a good team sport, there was Knachtlikkach, an ancient version of hockey. Speaking of creativity, Norsemen were skilled artisans. They loved working with wood, stone, and metal, carving intricate designs and creating beautiful jewelry. They even used bone and amber in their crafts. Textiles and tapestries added pops of color to their longhouses, though unlike the sturdier materials, these haven't survived as well. As Norsemen moved around, so did their religion. They believed in many gods and goddesses, each with their own quirks and stories. Basically, these gods were split into two categories, known as Aesir and Vanir. The Aesir gods were all about war and victory, while the Vanir focused on harvest and prosperity. Big names like Odin the Allfather, Thor the Thunder God, and Frey the god of fertility were the A-listers, while the mischievous trickster Loki and Forseti the justice of peace were among the minor gods. Viking religion practices involved communal feasts, toasts, and praises of their gods, along with offerings made during outdoor rituals in fields, by riverbanks, near lakes, and under trees. Their belief in these gods also played a part in their notion about what the afterlife entailed. For Norsemen, their loved ones, especially warriors who died in combat, went to incredible realms like Valhalla and Folkvangar, ruled by the gods. To ensure a safe passage to the afterlife, they buried their dead in boats, often accompanied by weapons, jewelry, and even sacrificed slaves. Here's another interesting fact. Norsemen were surprisingly open-minded about their religions. When they settled in new lands, they were cool with incorporating the Christian god into their belief system, since they already worshipped multiple gods. This eventually led to a full-blown conversion to Christianity, partly for peaceful relations when making trade, and partly because many Norsemen married locals and had no choice but to raise their kids in a blended religious household. Over time, the conversion of many Norsemen to Christianity increased the influence of the church while causing the decline of Viking power that ultimately led to the end of the Viking Age. Today, we still see traces of Norse culture, even though their age has long since ended. About 20% of English words are derived from Old Norse, including anger, ugly, weak, skull, ransack, window, skirt, and slaughter. Their seafaring prowess is celebrated in films like Norseman, and their artistry is evident in jewelry designs and tattoos, keeping the spirits of the Norse alive in contemporary culture. Even video games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and God of War have offered immersive experiences that transport players back to the Norse world. We hope you've enjoyed more of the background of the Nordic adventurers. If you think you can handle more, check out our other videos.